One of the things that I love stealing more than anything else is the tie. When I do close-up pickpocketing, or even just doing magic around the tables at a corporate event, this is a piece of gold. You can take them so easily when somebody's sat down or stood up. The technique is pretty much the same. Uh, it's just a great thing to steal because in psychologically, it's the most impossible thing to take off somebody. You know, the idea of having your watch stolen or your wallet lifted off you or your phone taken, all of these things kind of make sense to people, but the idea of somebody stealing your tie without you knowing, now that just seems utterly impossible. But it's totally possible, very doable, and something that I enjoy pretty much more than any other element of pickpocketing when I'm at work. Now, pretty much all ties work in the same way. We're gonna work through the physical aspect of what you do, and then we're going to talk about how you get away with it. Most ties, if not all ties, with what I would call a standard knot, which I would the schoolboy knot, the Windsor, the half Windsor, all of those. The way that the knot works is pretty much the same. You've got the short part of it, and then you've got the other part that loops around it in a variety of ways. What this means in practical terms is that one side of this tie is simply threaded through the knot. Now, there is a guide, a rule of thumb, and if I lift your collar up, we should be able to see. Just lift that up a second. It will slope up and point towards one side or the other. And that usually means that this is the side that is threading through. So if I take hold of the knot and pull this bit, and as you can see, yes, it is indeed this way. I will say this, it's not 100%. Now and again, you'll come to this side of the tie and it won't move at all, and you'll find, in fact, it's the other way round. But having said that, as a general piece of information, if the tie is pointing up in this direction, this will be the end that threads out. So therefore, if I were to take this part and pull it all the way through, the tie is now undone, and all I have to do is take the whole thing off his neck. Very, very simple. So from a practical point of view of how we do this, well, realistically, we're obviously having to get under here somehow and begin threading it through, or maybe from the back. But there's still a lot of fiddling around underneath the person's tie. My personal opinion on this and the way that I handle it is to just go for it right at the beginning. Start at the top. Yeah, right at the beginning. Normally, when I get the person up, it's the very first thing I do, and essentially, I'm lunging for the tie and peeling it back. You could use a little excuse about, let me, you've come a bit undone. Let me straighten you up. But to be honest with you, I don't bother doing any of the above. As the person approaches me, as they take the step forward, as I'm introducing myself, I'll just reach up under the tie and do this first move as I readjust their clothes, as I'm maybe asking them what they have inside. It happens so quickly that there is a sensation that they feel, but it doesn't mean anything. And at this stage, they could look down and the tie is still in place, the knot is where it needs to be. There is nothing untoward except, if we get you to do a little spin all the way around, this loop that's created at the back of the jacket. So having got that first part done, all I now have to do is to continue to thread the tie all the way out. And this, again, is where the attention management, the misdirection comes into being. What I tend to do is just direct them somewhere else. I might be asking them about something in their pocket. I quite often set up a challenge, I know that you have a phone inside your jacket pocket. I'm going to try and steal that phone out without you feeling. And I encourage them to sort of, stop me by bringing their hand up to get in the way as if they're going to try and stop me going in the jacket. All of this allows me to continuously follow the same action. And the action is this. My thumb comes against the knot to stop the knot from moving, because if I pull this on its own, the knot begins to shift and I don't want it to. So my thumb touches the edge of the tie knot to stop it from moving as my fingers go into the jacket, ostensibly as if I'm trying to get in there. And at the same time as my thumb touches it, I pull a bit more. And it's this action of taking it and pulling it back, this smooth action. I'm not pulling this way because I don't want to pull against their throat. I'm not jamming it this way. It's almost like a round action. And I want maybe in 2 or 3 moves at the most, I want to get the end of the tie out. Now, I will say this, occasionally, when you get to the bottom of the tie, the little tag area, sometimes it can tighten the knot up and you get a little snag right at the end. And the truth is, there's nothing that you can do apart from give it a good tug. All right, and don't be afraid to. All of this is covered by, constantly reaching into the jacket. And if it's a nice smooth tie, you don't even need to do that. It'll come smoothly and you don't even need to use a second hand against the knot. This really is about being bold. This is about being confident, relaxed and confident enough just to come in and do the move without a care in the world. Notice here, now the tie has come undone, the knot is still in place because the top button is done up and the jacket, the shirt collar is holding it in place. Which is nice because clearly if the person looks down, he still sees his tie in exactly the place it should be. It's impossible for him to see underneath the knot to notice that this part is missing because he can't physically look down at that. So just at a glance, he feels that his tie is still in place. To remove the tie from him completely, I'm simply going to take, if I turn you around so we can see, the tie is still behind the jacket, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it as far around as I can. Again, physically covering the action with a touch on the chest, on the stomach, or even on the arm, just something to physically direct his attention as I do. And I'm just moving my hand across his shoulder. This is the sensation he feels as I clip the tie away. So now to remove the tie completely from him, there's only a short distance to go. I need to clear the collar here. So I'm going to drop the knot down slightly and bring the whole thing over this way. And again, this could simply be done just as I get his attention for a brief second. All right, so that is the basic idea. We're going to run through that again because there's a couple of other little touches and other methods of removing the tie at the last minute. Now, the other thing to remember before you approach the tie steel is to think about the tie itself. The more silky, the more smooth the tie is, the more easily it will flow through as you remove it. Now, when you see people with sort of fabric ties, heavy cloth fabric ties, you're going to find that you're going to get halfway through the steel and the whole thing will jam up. It will tighten the knot as you're trying to peel it away, and you're going to find yourself in all sorts of problems. So really, when you're looking at a tie, excuse me, you can tell this is live mistakes and all. When you're looking at a tie, you need to look for a tie that the knot is not too tight. You don't want to, one of those really tight schoolboy knots. You want something that's got a bit of size, a bit of flexibility to it. The tie itself, you also want to be nice and smooth and silky. Also be aware of buttons on the shirt collar. Now this doesn't really make a huge difference, but it will change the way that you take the tie off. Because if there's buttons done up here, we are of course not going to be able to get the tie away this way. And it also means that if the button's done up, you need to begin the steel under here, which again lends for a slightly different technique to create the first loop. Okay, and I'll cover that now. It's a nice subtle thing. You're going to place your hand on the shoulder and just get your thumb underneath the collar to begin with. And once under the collar, you can just hook underneath the tie itself, and you're just going to peel it back. So you're clipping it from here to here to get that first action going. Let me just show you from a more exposed angle. And once again, we're going to say thank you to our live mannequin for allowing me to physically manipulate him like this and pull him around. So we're going to place the hand on the shoulder, your thumb comes underneath, and you're going to squeeze to get this little beginning started, this little first loop. Once you've got a bit of material here, then you could leave it. I could get this first bit done just as I'm sort of adjusting him and tidying him up and maybe asking what he's got on him. And I can leave this alone. I could continue on with a few other steals. I could even use the moment of revealing something. So say for instance, we've done a steal of the phone and I'm going to be revealing this phone to him. Let's turn you back round again. Now, I'm going to use the moment of revealing this to steal a bit more of the tie. So I'm going to bring my hand up to here to get a grip as I pull this back and then bring this into view. Or alternatively, I could show that I have his phone, and in that moment where he reacts, that natural moment of "you have my phone," almost as a sort of one of these moments, one of these ha 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 funny moments, I have your phone, he responds, and I lean in and just take a little bit more of the tie away. And I can take my time over this. I don't have to rush this tie steal, because realistically, this should always be toward the end. If you're doing a number of steals, the tie coming away should be right at the very end, because it's the most dramatic reveal. It's the big ending. It's the big finish. So be willing to take your time over removing this tie. So let me just pull this back down to save having to dress and undress him every 5 minutes. There we are. Look at that, tucking you in as well. Dressing you. There we are. Looking beautiful. Well done. Well done, you. So again, we can either come here under the collar with the thumb and peel it back to get the first movement, or my preference when there's no button is just to very almost dramatically just come straight in with the first little moment as you're asking him about the rest of his clothes. Now, obviously the microphone is here. From your perspective, that doesn't feel like anything in particular, does it? It's a very quick action. You're not immediately drawn in thinking what's going on up here. Okay, it's a nice, swift, just a confident, and remember what we talked about, confidence. It's all about, being smooth, being relaxed, being free of tension. So from this position, right at the very beginning, he's come up, we've shaken hands, we've had our introduction, and I would simply say, let's have a look. What sort of things do you have on you? I notice there's a few things here, a few things down here. Is this keys I can feel in your pocket? So notice the way that I'm asking a lot of questions, making a lot of statements. By the time his brain catches up with everything I've said, we've moved so far away from this initial action, even if he was aware of it or was sort of thinking, oh, what was that? His mind has been moved on. It's been redirected to somewhere else. Having got this loop in place, I simply can take my time to finish it off, to remove it. And again, if I don't want to use other steals as a rationale, I could simply maneuver him. If I took this here and said, could I get you to take a step forward? Just come forward a little bit, that's fine. And again, that's allowed me to get the rest of the tie out to free it up. Once the tie is free, removing the final part, as I've said, could either be flicking the whole thing off his shoulder. I could even clip the tie here. So if I get you to step just a little closer to me, that's it. I could clip the tie here. If I were to direct his attention over in this direction with maybe a look and a point, and at the same time clipping this, walk this way, I end up with the tie over, almost over my own shoulder, or certainly the other side of him. By making sure that as I move past him, my body is in contact with his as I come by, the minute sensation here of the tie coming away is totally and utterly lost. So another way to remove the tie itself is to dissolve the knot completely. And this is what you're going to have to do if the buttons are done up. Because again, if the buttons have done up, there is no way of bringing the tie round. Either it has to come this way or that way. And in this case, we're going to go that way, and I'll explain what I mean in a second. So again, let's imagine that the knot is done up. Our thumb has to come under, obviously, because of the buttons in the way. We begin the action by peeling this around. We've continued the steal to the point of the tie being undone, but now we can't take the tie this way. So what we have to do is to bring the, either take the whole thing and pull down and feed the small end back through, but that's actually quite hard to cover. There's a lot of action going on at the front, and it's really difficult to hide that. So what we do instead is we dissolve the knot by taking hold of this end, oops, and this end, and just, doing this. And that's a quick action just on a little moment. You can simply place your hand here, give a little tug there, and now imagining the button in place, all we have to do is just pull this end and feed it through like we did earlier. And again, this is very much about keeping the attention, giving them other things to think and feel, and that allows us to take the tie and slide it through from the back. The last thing I will say, and I won't bother with the knot itself, we're just using our imaginations now to feel the knot is in play. Let's assume that we've got to this point, we've taken the short end out, the knot is still in place and it's held there. The final way I would suggest to remove the tie altogether would be to come from this angle, and I'm going to use, let's keep us both in frame, hi mum, to use from this angle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to steal the tie with this hand, but I'm going to use this arm as cover, and it's this idea of maybe pointing at a family member. Maybe if there's somebody with a camera, you're going to reach across here, coming underneath as you take the tie, and then you're going to bring the tie around and over using this hand to cover and come over to ask him to go back to his seat. All right, just a little bit of nice choreography. The tie's in place, the knot is there. We're going to reach up, take hold of the knot itself, and holding on to the knot as we come to this place, as we're pointing for him to go back to his seat maybe, if you'd like to go back to your seat, and this hand comes down, comes over, which is the larger motion that he follows, and I guide him back to his chair. And of course, this now means that I can call him back and reveal that he has his tie. Excuse me, sir, I have your tie and your dignity. Thank you very much. Sorry, he kept his dignity, don't worry. So one of the things about this is now, how do I reveal the tie? What do I do? Now, the reality is, of course, taking the tie off somebody and just holding up the tie at the end, calling them back for their tie, that's a strong moment for most people. But actually, I think there are better ways to reveal the tie. Now, personally, what I like to do, one way would be to just have the tie hidden behind my back and ask the person if they have everything back. Double check your pockets, make sure you have everything. And you get them to go through this process of checking and checking and checking. And you want them to be convinced, yes, I have everything back. Have you got your phone? Have you got your wallet? Is there anything else that I've stolen? Are you missing anything at all? And really labor the point. Because almost every time the person will check and double check and triple check and have no idea about the tie because they're not thinking about this at all. Hilarious for the audience to watch and great for the reveal. The other thing that you can do, particularly if you're in the right environment, either that they're sat down or that you can contrive a reason to maybe turn your back, go back to back, maybe if there's a magic element to what you're doing or a mind reading element, you now have the opportunity to put very quickly their tie on yourself. And it doesn't matter if you're not wearing a jacket. I mean, heck, you could only have a t-shirt on and still be able to quickly put the tie up, tuck it into your trousers or your jeans, or just leave it hanging. But here's the interesting thing. People can look at you and still not recognize that you're now wearing their tie, which does facilitate a really interesting moment. And that is to place your hand on their neck where their tie was, and in one smooth action, run the hand down, come back up to the knot and give it a little wiggle, and it creates this really odd moment in their mind, as if you've just wiped the tie off them and up to your neck, and now it's on, it's fixed, and it's a real knot. And in these instances, I would invite the person to remove the tie themselves. And it's a bit like if somebody's ever stolen your watch, and in your head you're thinking, it takes me ages to get my watch off and on in the morning. Same theory. In that action, I seem to have placed the tie on, and now by inviting them to try and remove the tie themselves, it solidifies in their mind the impossibility of my steal and getting it back on my person. So just a really nice way of revealing the tie. If you're working with somebody sat down, it really doesn't make any difference. The only thing that's ever going to change is the angle, at which point it's worth just mentioning in every sense of pickpocketing, the height of you compared to the height of the person will make a difference purely from where the object is. You know, if the pocket is up here, I at least to lift it up higher to remove the item. If the pocket is down here, it's less hassle. Okay, so your height compared to their height doesn't change the technique, but it kind of just alters the angles ever so slightly. Similarly with stealing a tie from somebody stood up is just the same as them sat down, arguably easier when they are lower than you though. Just one thing to mention about the tie steal, because people perceive it to be such a difficult thing to do, giving you an easy way of practicing it makes perfect sense. And to be honest, the easiest way to practice, and it's the way that I began quite a long time ago, about 8 years, 9 years ago when I first took a tie, the way that I learned it was by telling people, or basically asking people, would you like me to show you how somebody would steal a tie? I'm not a pickpocket myself, or I'm learning, or I'm new, I'm only developing these skills. I don't know how to do it yet, but I can tell you how a thief would steal your tie. And that's the frame that you're setting up. Would you like me to explain how you steal a tie? And you literally walk through the first part. You say to the person, basically what happens is you grab hold of this part of the tie and you pull back. And at that moment, I say, oh, sorry, what kind of knot is this? Now, it doesn't really matter what they say to this. They'll either say it is an X knot, it's a Windsor knot, or it's this knot, or it's a half Windsor, or whatever the name of the knot happens to be. Or they'll say, I don't know. Now, if they say, for example, it's a Windsor knot, I continue the action, but I say, oh, you can't do it with these ones. And I act as if, by bad luck, I've picked the one knot I can't steal or that can't be stolen. If they say, I don't know, then I make it up and I go, oh, it looks like a Windsor knot. You can't steal these. Yeah, so either way I lie. But the whole point is I build up, I'm going to show you something and, oh, it can't be done with this one. Oh, sorry, it can't be done. And that's enough for all of their attention to drop away. By doing this, I've got the knot prepared, and I would simply then direct their attention to something else. Oh, but I can show you how somebody steals a watch, for example. That allows me to finish the technique as I direct their attention to their watch. And the reveal would simply be along the lines of, the real key to stealing somebody's tie is misdirection. And then, of course, I'd hand them the tie back. The reason I tell you this is that sometimes we need an out. We need a safety net around our first attempt at doing something. Now, I personally don't like safety nets because when you've got a safety net, you really don't give it your all. You don't really push yourself. You don't give everything over to what you're trying to achieve. And sometimes when we have a safety net in front of us, we can be a bit careless. But this is a nice, gentle way of beginning. If it's the first time you've tried to take a tie, if you've never done it before, this is a good excuse, a good way of getting into it. It also allows it to be a standalone thing. You could be at a party doing some magic, you could see somebody with a tie, and you could just say, mate, I met somebody a couple of weeks ago who, he's a pickpocket, and he taught me how to steal ties. Now, I can't do it, but do you want me to show you how it's done? But the truth is, we live in a world where if you offer somebody, this is the secret to a magic trick, they want to know what it is. YouTube is full of reveals of magic tricks. And the irony being is the YouTube account which is revealing a trick probably has more hits than the YouTube account showing the trick. So there's a real interest in people of how it's done. So if you want to start the process by saying, I'll show you how it's done, and use that as the cover to steal the tie, It's a good way to build your confidence in the techniques themselves. Hopefully you've watched the earlier videos in this series and you've worked on your own confidence and you've realized that's a natural resource that you have. But you do need to have confidence in the techniques themselves as well. And this is a great way to develop that.